Well, before we came on the air, I spoke to the Israeli spokesman, Mark Regev. I asked him whether, given Ehud Olmert's bullish declaration tonight that Israel had dealt Hezbollah a heavy blow, he was able to put a date on an end to the Israeli military campaign in Lebanon.
Well, the idea is, of course, to bring about the full implementation of those UN Security Council resolutions that call on Hezbollah to be dismantled as a military machine. And we believe our military exercise at the moment, our ongoing military operation, is weakening Hezbollah, and that can lay the ground for what ultimately will be diplomatic, and that is the international community supporting the government of Lebanon to disarm Hezbollah.
So how much longer will the campaign continue?
I can't give a day on that. I can't give a specific timeline, but I would say the following to people in Europe especially. If you want this campaign to finish sooner rather than later, then you have the opportunity to be part of this. You're not going to stop the campaign by sending out a press release or giving a nice speech. It's clear what the conditions on the ground that are needed for a ceasefire, and I think Europe can be part of that.
Mr. Regev, at the current rate of progress, how many more women, children or old people do you expect to kill?
Well, I don't think we want to kill anyone. We're not trying to kill anyone except for the Hezbollah guerrillas, the Hezbollah terrorists who are trying to launch missiles into Israeli cities. I think we're making a maximum effort.
Are we supposed to take seriously the comments of your Prime Minister when he says, "I am sorry from the bottom of my heart"? Are we really supposed to take that seriously?
Definitely, and I think he was speaking for all Israelis. No one wanted to see the sort of horror that we saw yesterday in Kana. That was something that I think all Israelis felt very sorry about, which we regret. I think, to be fair, it's just to point the finger at my country. I know the UN has spoken a relief coordinator about how Hezbollah, and it's his words, not mine, he talked about Hezbollah using cowardly tactics, hiding behind innocent civilians, women and children, he said. And so I think there have to be clear questions asked as to Hezbollah's strategy of deliberately using the Lebanese population.
You're an intelligent man, Mr. Regev. Do you really believe that the sort of operation you're waging in Lebanon is going to diminish support for organisations like Hezbollah? Deep in your heart, you really believe that, do you?
I have more faith in the Arab world than maybe some other people do. I think we've seen a lot of nuance. We've seen out of Arab governments and Arab intellectuals, we've seen in Lebanon itself, that people are sick and tired of this extremist agenda that Hezbollah represents. People are sick and tired of this Iranian proxy in the Arab world. People understand that no one really wanted this cycle of violence. No one really wanted to see this explosion, this bloodshed in two countries, in Israel and Lebanon. And I think there's an anger and a frustration with Hezbollah that is above the normal knee-jerk reaction, which is unite against Israel.
And if I put it to you that your response might equally well be summarised as, if you can't come to love us, you're going to fear us.
No, I actually think that there is a possibility here to move forward. I mean, what is Israel saying? We're saying let's implement UN Security Council resolutions on Lebanon. There's no gap between what Israel is saying about Lebanon and what the declared positions of the international community and even the Arab world are. Let's implement those resolutions. And I would say...
Indeed, and why don't you implement the resolutions on the West Bank, Jerusalem and the other occupied territories?
Well, we have accepted those resolutions. 242 is the basis of the peace process. But let's be clear here. Everyone agrees that if Hezbollah was dismantled, if it was disarmed as a military structure, we wouldn't be here today. And I'd say, had the international community been more serious about its own resolutions on Lebanon, a lot of bloodshed could have been avoided.
OK, Mark Regev, thank you. Well, also, just before we went on the air, I spoke to the Lebanese Minister Sami Haddad. I asked him what he thought had been gained by the Lebanese Prime Minister's decision to refuse to meet the US Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice yesterday.
Well, yesterday was a very somber day and was a day of mourning, and it was just not the right mood. We were not in the right mood to engage, and this country and our civilian population is being subjective to collective punishment. It has to stop. The UK government and particularly the US government, if they really like this country and they support our government, should pressure Israel to stop this massacre.
Absolutely, but it's only going to happen through diplomacy. In those circumstances, I ask you again, what was gained by cancelling a meeting with the American Secretary of State?
It's to signal that we want an unconditional and immediate ceasefire.
Now, the Israelis say that Hezbollah has been so damaged it may never recover. What is the Lebanese government's assessment?
Well, I'm not a military expert, but it's clear, and I think you share my opinion, that Hezbollah is gaining politically, both in this country, but more importantly in the region, in the Middle East, in the Arab world, and in non-Arab countries of the Middle East. And many of these countries are pro-Western, their governments are pro-Western, and I don't see the benefit of going on with this war. I don't think that the Israelis expect to knock out Hezbollah. It's not easy to defeat Hezbollah militarily, and Hezbollah seems to be winning politically.
You say that the consequence of this Israeli onslaught is increasing support for Hezbollah. Have you got personal experience of that?
Yes, you talk to people in the street and you hear what people have to say. I mean, people who don't like Hezbollah, but people who support them seem to support them more. I mean, they haven't made more enemies. Their supporters have become more entrenched, and maybe they have acquired a few additional supporters, but they seem to have acquired many more supporters outside Lebanon.
How much longer can the government of Lebanon survive under this sort of pressure?
The government of Lebanon is having a very hard time governing in this state of war that we did not ask for. Whatever the excuse that Israel invoked to devastate the country for the past 3 weeks, the response is out of proportion with, the incident that caused this war. But one of the hardest is to cope with the flood of refugees. We have between 20 to 25% of the Lebanese population that has been turned into refugees. And if you put it on any scale in any other country, you appreciate the predicament that this government is facing now. And even if the war were to stop tomorrow, many of these people cannot go back to their homes because their homes have been destroyed. And even if we have the funding to rebuild, you cannot rebuild in a day or two. You need a year or more just to rebuild. So I don't know how. It's not the question of how long the government can survive. It's how long can this country survive?
Mr. Haddad, thank you for joining us.